it doesn't work. It's like what even is this?
It's I think that I think as technology becomes more accessible, and by accessible I mean more affordable, cheaper to manufacture, or less expensive to manufacture, we're going to be seeing a lot more stuff fail because it's essentially it's cheapening itself. It's like a race to the bottom, and it's always been a race to the bottom in terms of like physical goods. But now I think we're really seeing the race to the bottom with software. I mean, Lord Muskie has essentially ruined Twitter. I mean, it still functions at its core, I think, or at least on the surface, it looks like it's functioning. But every time I look at the internet now, I see some kind of exodus to some other platform, and I don't expect any of them to be around in 10 years.
Jack's starting a new platform. I forget what it's called,
And
but
that kind
it's
of
really
tells us a lot.
yeah, it's really funny that oh, it's Blue Sky.
Yeah, that's it.
The idea that like Jack starts this, well, not just him, but is the head of this platform and steps down, sells it off, and then in the process, the person who acquires it breaks it so terribly that he has to start a new competitor to take the place of what he sold. That would be the biggest fucking fleece of all time if he fucking finessed that shit and sold Elon some shit and then Elon broke it and then he starts up another one and then takes all the users that he just sold Elon for $44 billion. I mean, I don't know if he necessarily got a significant amount of that 44 billion because of the timing of his exit. It's like he might have still had stock at the time or he might have sold it off when he stepped down. I don't know for sure. It's probably out there, but the issue being he still got his bag and was able to like distance himself from the company before it started failing. So people only associate Jack with success as far as social networks go. So that'll give him the benefit of the doubt in starting a new one. So I think it's like people are they're gonna. It's not that they should trust him, but they're going to trust him out the gate in a way that Elon's like really destroyed the trust with the users by not keeping a functioning platform.
I think it'd be kind of nice if a lot of these services that exist, these platforms that all know, yeah, services like Amazon and eBay, and if they tried to reduce their attempt, dial back their attempts at making people engage with each other. I think that the drive for engagement, essentially to force people to load up new crap into their browser so that they can generate, whatever AdSense, it actually cheapens interaction. Like when I was younger, I used to think that it took like an hour of online interaction to you know to accomplish what could be done in like 5 minutes, real time interaction. But now I think it's more like 4 to 10 hours online interaction before the average person is going to have the same quality of interaction with somebody else on the internet. I mean, just through typing and staring at a screen. Talking to somebody is a completely different. That's like almost a one-to-one engagement in terms of communication because you don't need to see somebody to talk to them.
Right. And it definitely like the way that the conversation can evolve in real time is much different than typing. Even if somebody's in a chat room, it's still different.
I think chat rooms also, they're like, it's like it's what a forum wishes it could be at any moment. But a forum is so much like, it's a long form version where people take extended amounts of time to enter their responses or their statements. Chat rooms happen in the moment, but even chat rooms are limited by, the network speed. Whatever's happening on the network is always going to inhibit, well, and then of course typing ability and how quickly somebody can read, whether or not their display is even the right kind of display for what they're using it for. I wonder how this is going to change, like moving as things move forward. Once there aren't limitations, like the network is no longer the limitation, that someone's bandwidth is a limitation. Their computer isn't even a limitation. Their phone or whatever their interneting device happens to be. Obviously, this is like a future that could exist but doesn't, and probably won't because capitalism. But
Right. I'm just trying to figure out like what's the end point in terms of what types of content are people going to be making, and it, it's weird in terms of like, do people just want to hear themselves and see themselves inserted into media and not necessarily have good media? Because I feel like with the AI, um like the AI Drake and Weekend tracks that just went around, it's like I think they were viral, but they weren't good. And there's this element of people like, oh, this sounds just like him. And it's like, well, there's elements of it that sounded like it, but what were people latching on to in terms of why it went viral? And I was thinking about it. It seems like there's this element of like, especially when you look at the blue checks, people want to be able to create something that's as good as the pinnacle of something without putting in the effort that that person put in to do it, because they don't believe how much effort that person put in, and they don't believe they deserve the acclaim. So there's this notion of like equalizing creativity by making it easier for like somebody to make a Drake song or a Weekend song without that person having to like. It's like if you watch Murder She Wrote, there's always this person who's like, "Oh, you're a writer. Here's my script. You should like help me publish my script." And that person is obviously self-absorbed and narcissistic from the viewer's perspective. But when a person is that into like that person, it's not. It doesn't seem obvious to that person. It's like if you're not a successful writer, why would Drake want to sing your song? Or why would The Weeknd want to sing your song? But now that you don't have to get their permission, the person who's just writing frivolously can make The Weeknd sing their song or make Drake sing their song. And then the non-discerning person is going to hype that song up because to them, they can't tell, they don't know what makes a good Drake song or a good song, period. So that person, non-discerning, is then going to give this hype to that creative pseudo creative element that is co-opting part of one artist's essence to make what they're calling democratic basically uh, computer assisted theft in a way that is obscuring it doesn't necessarily even obscure the theft, but it makes it seem like it's not stealing something. Which is also where now that the music industry is getting involved in the actual the battle, it's like I don't think the AI bros are gonna win this one in the way that they think they are. And there's a few reasons in terms of like legal precedent. So when the Michael Jackson hologram was created, it was done with the consent of the estate. And then like when the Tupac hologram was created, it was done with the consent of the estate. So there's this element of like dead artists having uh their likeness but also their voices used. It's not new. There's like a whole
They don't
Whitney
have to be
Houston.
dead though, do they? I mean, like James Earl Jones, right?
No, I'm starting there because they can't fight back in terms of like they can't actually start a legal battle because they're dead. So that's like somebody like Prince. He can't fight back now that he's gone, and he would definitely be against it while he was alive. So those people, their estates handle
that makes sense.
their likeness and their voice in a way that when a person's alive, they can still influence that. But if they've signed over certain parts of their likeness, then Disney may control it, or Universal may control it, or Columbia may control it. So it's not. There are, like you're pointing out, the James Earl Jones. He's given his likeness, his voice, or sold it to Disney for Darth Vader, for future artificial intelligence constructed, instances where Darth Vader uses his actual voice, but it's new. But because he did it while he was alive, they're setting precedent concerning how much control someone has over their voice. Because previously, it was assumed that the voice could not be copyrighted and couldn't be protected. But at this point, there are things that have set precedent concerning the ability to protect the voice. So it's not going to be like, oh, voices are just in public domain because when you speak, it's in the public. Like, nah, that's not going to be how it works in terms of the fact that people have already been able to license their voices. There is legal precedent.
And he's also the Lion King. He's Mufasa. They own that property too. They can generate the Lion King. Disney can, right? In theory.
Yeah, theoretically, yeah.
I mean, this might not be bad for like animation. Some voice actors are dead. Doesn't mean their character.
But the issue being, right? Some voice actors now are subject to having their performances turned over to AI when they didn't intend for that to happen.
Oh, yeah.
So that's one of the big issues in terms of the companies that control the recordings that artists signed before AI was able to do the things it is now. Those people are now subject to that, their work being basically owned by other people. So it's not really democratizing creativity, and it's actually making it more difficult for smaller creators to get compensated for their work. And this is where it makes it difficult to know if the people who are pushing the narrative concerning democratizing creativity are shills, or if they actually believe that because they don't understand either democratizing things or creativity. It's possible they're
I think it's a little bit
both too.
of both. I was just reading about a bass artist who got in trouble because they used all of the sounds in a sample library to make some music, and it just happened to be very similar, like extremely similar to the example provided with the sample library construction kit itself. And so they're under fire because they released, a handful of tracks that are pretty very similar. Like they might as well have just changed a few things and changed tempo and changed key, but left a lot of the overarching automation intact. And so there's this whole we're back into the sample. The sample debate has reemerged in a sense within electronic music because people are now unable to release music because they didn't read the fine print on the sample library that said, oh yeah, by the way, you can create music, you just can't release it commercially. And not all sample libraries or loop libraries or music construction sound sets contain these kinds of clauses. It might be like one portion of a sample library that contains this clause, but there's music being made that can't be released. And it's not even AI generated, it's just like a sample. And that's all it would take for AI to listen to an entire library and then know how to recreate those sounds. Well, no, it wouldn't know how. It would just recreate the sounds. It would just generate them.
Well, that's like before even this whole era of music generation, there were like drum pattern generators.
Yeah.
They had them in Reason, but then after, specific programs came out just focused on drum pattern generation. I used one before, and it's like you can tweak it so that it gets to be more unique. But the way I was using it was just to like see how the tool worked. It wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna make an album and it's gonna be much easier because this drum pattern generator. It was like, no, I just want to see how this new tool works. And I think a lot of, in playing around with it, a lot of the dubstep music started to sound the same. Well, it sounded the same out of the gate. A lot of it did, but people were using these generators and not even really bothering to like tweak them. And once I saw that, it just really turned me off to dubstep. And it's not like it was my taste that made it go out of style, but it was, when dubstep went out of style, I was like, by that point, it had played itself out, but the commercialization of the production and subsequently the homogenization of the sound was like a signal to me in terms of like what was happening across other types of music. And then I started to recognize it in terms of like, you saw it happen in hip hop, but it wasn't as easy to recognize.
I remember with when dubstep, when I think of as peak dubstep, there was this moment when every forum that I went to, all of the questions were about Serum, a VSTI that specializes in massive sounds, just banging, fiery sounds, huge sounds. And that's all people wanted. They were trying to share presets. And next thing you know, you see threads where people are asking, hey, which thread had that one preset from that song? And everyone's just chasing the same sounds. They're like not even trying to understand how the synthesizer works. They just want a carbon copy of the synthesizer so that they can, unleash their fury. And then it turns out, there are like many interpretations of wavetable modulation, phase modulation that all do the same thing. You just have to understand how the synthesis engine works, and a lot of them can do the same things. But others are pretty and others are ugly, and it makes it easier to use a pretty synthesizer on a screen, I think.
Well, and one of the things I saw happening in terms of the way music was getting created, when smaller artists thought that they were on the rise, they would start to define their music based on bigger artists that had made it in the genre that they're trying to, get popular in. So it would be like Dr. Dre type beat or Skrillex type track or, Diesel Boy type. And then you're like in the process, you're like, well, what's the actual artist name? So it's really, they were accidentally obscuring their own identities behind trying to identify with these sounds. And what they didn't realize is the better they were at emulating the sound that they were trying to portray, the less likely you're going to identify them in their own sound. And they're always going to be in the shadow of that person that they were emulating. So there was this like inability for new producers specifically to make their own sound for like 2005 to basically like not all the way up to now, in terms of some people have broken the mold and gotten out of it, especially with the Afro beats. But commercial music really sort of capped its growth. I think when people like Paris Hilton started getting like music contracts, people stopped trying to do original shit, and then they just really just started trying to emulate whatever was popular at the time. In terms of like, it was really difficult to know if artists were becoming popular because the record company decided to make them popular, or if people were really liking the music. And it's almost like when the internet really got popular and the distance between the audience and the production started to like get smaller and smaller, it became increasingly difficult to know if what we're seeing was planned or not. And I'll point to a specific incident that people really had a hard time figuring out. Like when Howard Stern came down from the ceiling and his ass was in Eminem's face, and then also when Eminem was like getting into a fight with Courage the Cowardly Dog, people didn't know if that shit was real or staged or not at the time. And it's really funny now to point at those things and be like, they didn't know if it was staged, because it seems so obvious now. But at the time, people were really, really thinking that shit was real. And it's not even, it's not the same people that think the Will Smith slap was real necessarily, but the Will Smith slap is like a remnant of that, in terms of like things that in 20 years people are going to know it was obviously staged, but at the time people are like, was that real or not? And there's a lot of people who think it was real, but again, at the time people thought the Howard Stern thing was fucking real and not completely staged.
Didn't Will Smith just turn around and make some like really hardcore drama period piece, like about the guy that we've all seen the picture of, who the portrait of the black?
It was made before the slap happened.
That was made before the slap happened.
Yeah, it was just scheduled to come out afterwards.
Huh. Well, I guess we'll have to see how it affects his career long term.
Well, it's interesting in terms of like he's still seeing negative repercussions, and I know it'll go away eventually, but of all things, I feel like this is really like Will Smith got more career repercussions appearing. It appears that way compared to Dana White, who slapped his wife, who basically has had no career repercussions. And it's like,
But maybe that's the expectation of the audience. They expect Dana White to be violent. He manages violent people. He encourages an environment where people just, well, not all of them, but some of them engage in that in a high level of shit talk.
Dana White himself said that if you hit a woman, you don't come back from that. Career wise,
well,
he said that before he did it.
Well, shit. And he's just hasn't,
because he was talking about somebody. He was condemning somebody else about that, and said, that's like career ending. That you should never come back from. If you hit your wife or you hit your girlfriend or hit a woman, period. That should end someone's career. He said that. Not me. He said that when he had his platform. I mean, he still has it. So that's what I mean. Like,
well, he's not listening to himself then.
But again, it's like the notion that Will Smith, with the clearly kayfabe slap that Chris Rock knew was going to happen, from my perspective, whether he improvised it or not, maybe, I don't know if he improvised it, but both of those people are too good of an actor. And Chris Rock is not the same level as Will Smith. They're too good in terms of keeping their composure to break character if they had a setup. So like once they commit to it, neither one of them is going to like back down on the spot because they've already committed to it. Now, I think it was received different than they expected? Most definitely, which is also why now Chris Rock is doing this like Dave Chappelle right wing ish comedy tour where he's like talking about how he put on that Will Smith movie just to watch him get whipped. And it's like, dude, if Chris Rock made that joke like 5 years ago, people would boo him out of the room, even if he was Chris Rock. But now it's like, okay to make a mocking slave joke just because he's black, but also because everybody saw him get slapped in their minds. Now it's okay. That's there's always this notion of like not putting people on pedestals, but watching Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock become what they've become is like one of the biggest disappointments of all time in terms of like, dude, Dave Chappelle made Half Baked. How did we go from Half Baked to fucking anti-trans? How do we go from fucking Pootie Tang, in retrospect, Louis C.K. directing, Yeah, there were signs. So it's like it's weird to see these people do these things that as an adult I wouldn't you couldn't pay me to publicly say or do the things that they're doing. Like the bit that Chris Rock does about watching Emancipation to see Will Smith get beat is that's fucked up. That's like playing on generational trauma. That's playing on a year old incident at this point. It's like like in terms of current events, it's really old. And for him to like do that joke, it's in it's in the poorest of tastes. It's not funny. And in the process, you're like, oh, these people have just become angry, bitter old men who just happen to have a platform. So it's like very I feel like it makes me more cognizant of not condemning young people for simply being young. Um Not condemning them for liking different things. Like they don't I don't like the current rap music. I don't need to like the current rap music. They don't need my fucking approval. They're gonna have their festivals and they're gonna have their shows without my 40-year-old ass. And I don't, I understand that and I'm glad. It's not
Good for them.
the issue is I'm not gonna say, oh, kids these days, they don't know music. It's not for me. So I'm not gonna get bent out of shape because I don't understand
I mean, my
XXX
heroes are still making
Tentacion
music,
or
so it's not like there isn't music
I
being
don't,
made.
you know, I'm not gonna say that some of the musical legends that I used to listen to aren't still making music, but I have a hard time in terms of philosophically thinking that somebody isn't doing something for the sake of appearances after so long. And that's what I mean, like Snoop Dogg, for example. I'm not gonna listen to his music now. It's not like if I encountered Snoop, I would definitely try to smoke with him or something. But I used to be such a huge fan of Snoop Dogg, but things change. And in terms of like, I'm not gonna go out of my way to like stay up on his career because he evolved. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
And if somebody's not evolving, I'm not gonna listen to them either. There's like some artists that still sound the same as they did 20 years ago. I'm not fucking listening to them either. So it's more so I'm just not expecting. I feel like if my tastes are the same as a musician's taste that I used to listen to 20 years ago, one of us didn't evolve, and that's not good. And that's gonna like make me cognizant of it anyway, which is where like it may be good. There's some things where
I think Snoop Dogg's biggest release in the last 6 years was from Crook to Cook, platinum recipes from the Boss Dog's Kitchen.
I couldn't name a single song off of that.
It's got hits like Billionaire's Bacon and OG OG Munchies and Chip Roundup. How to make dope Pringles and Flamin' Hot Choritos.
Are those real songs? Or
No, this is a cookbook.
Oh, it's a cookbook.
Yeah. From Crook to Cook. Platinum recipes from the Boss Dog's Kitchen.
See, when you said it, I thought it was an album name and not actually. So that's what Snoop's up to, right? Which
Yeah,
again, it's like
he's got a cookbook.
Good for him. Well, I mean,
That's awesome.
well, he was like into crypto and like, definitely getting out of music. But it's like,
Yeah.
man, what the fuck does a 50-year-old have to rap about? Your grandkids?
The grandkids basketball game.
Right. Like, I don't want to hear about no fucking 50-year-old rapper. Like, it just doesn't. Nah, bro. Come on. No, they need to hang that shit up.
I am
I don't even want to
interested
see
in the
50 year
sandwiches.
old bro. I don't want to see 50-year-old people in mixed martial arts. Why would I want to see them in gangster rap or like rap at all? It's like,
Oh man, Trap Kitchen, mac and all over the world, banging mac and cheese recipes from around the world. Hey, you can get Trejo's tacos recipes and stories from Danny Trejo's Taquerito stand or restaurant.
well, and it's like, okay, he's a perfect example. Um, he was in Far Cry 6, actually promoting Trejo's Tacos. Um, he just popped up on RuPaul's Drag Race. It's like he's not gonna play the badass drug dealer on screen forever. He's got to evolve and do other things.
Oh
And then
yeah,
there's this element of like he's done it way better than a lot of people. Like what was it in Anchorman? He plays like a bartender. Um and he's still doing a lot of like active shit, but it's not the same.
oh he's like a complete like re-character writing. Now he's the guy that has the taco restaurant. He's the guy.
Yeah, like he was in
He's the chill dude behind the bar you can actually talk to.
he plays like the badass's father now because
Yeah.
he was in like I think it was the Flash or some or maybe Legends of Tomorrow or something. But he's like he can't play the villain because he's too old and he knows that. But he can play the what you think's the villain's father or some shit, and it still works. So you can't. I think people can't be deluded about aging into different things. Um, but again, that's also why, like I said, if somebody's like doing the same music style as 20 years ago, it's like it's off-putting to me as somebody who doesn't want to stagnate. And I think that's where I can probably name a few artists that I still listen to from or listen to their new stuff from 20 years later who I was listening to 20 years ago. But not that many. It's gonna be a handful. Like Justin Timberlake, fucking Jamiroquai. There's like a handful of people or a handful of groups. If Outkast ever put out anything together again, I would listen to it. uh, you know, Killer Mike is one. Um, LP, but you know, I could if I took an hour, I could probably write them all down in terms of like it's just not that many, and it's
Yeah.
not. I don't think that's condemning any artist or anything. It's just like, look at Diesel Boy. He's spinning like house now. Not to say he doesn't still do drum and bass, but Diesel Boy's not doing the same shit at all. Not even remotely. I think he spins under a different name now. As a matter of fact, I mean, he still has Diesel Boy, but what was it? Halen. Yeah, he goes by Halen.
I actually just went through my YouTube and unsubscribed from almost everything because I was just seeing a bunch of recommendations for crap. And I found myself just searching for everything anyways. And I'm still getting a bunch of crap. For
Yeah,
some reason it thinks I want some Rick and Morty content.
well, I've been doing similar in terms of like unsubscribing and doing don't recommend this. One of the things is if it's like older than a year, I'll definitely do that. But um, my content does seem to be getting better after I take more time to focus on doing that. Uh, but it's still there's so much shit out there in terms of useless, mindless content that's just trying to get your attention and push an advertisement onto you that it is like now you have to actively avoid that shit so you don't get your time wasted. Um, and I know we're not the only ones doing it. I feel like kids are probably more prone to doing that than anybody.
Oh, just to be like
It
not
seems like,
interested.
and not to like get wrapped up in things that they aren't actually uh, trying to give their time to. And it's like they may be. It was wild to see so many kids get involved in Pokemon Go and then watch so many adults get mad at it, only for the adults to like take over. Um, and it's like you see kids get discouraged from getting into things en masse because the adults don't want their kids to be seen as sheep, ironically, but at the same time, they want them to have things, not necessarily things to do. Um, but it's like they need them to consume, but they don't actually want to give them spaces. And you see this over and over where like in Chicago recently, there was like this outrage over the teens like taking over. And it's like, where the fuck do they have to go? There's no spaces for them. All the spaces for kids have either been converted to spaces for adults or just shut down completely. So there is this like pseudo appearance of them caring for kids, but then not giving kids kid controlled spaces, which is, it sounds like it wouldn't be possible. But what I mean is like a discovery zone or like what the place? Block Party was more for adults.
Yeah.
But or like a Chuck E. Cheese. Even Chuck E. Cheese is now like adult oriented. Like they sell alcohol at a lot of them, and
Well,
uh, it's a matter of they thought that they needed to appeal to the adults to keep the adults bringing the kids, which is like on the one hand maybe, but now Chuck E. Cheese is no longer a kid space. It's a shared space for kids and adults, and that causes problems. So that's where I mean, I've seen it happen in Indiana, and I'm sure the rest of the country is no different in terms of like it seemed like it happened slowly, but it didn't actually happen all that slowly. I think it was like we were growing up at the same time that it was happening, so uh, we were less
Bloomington
aware.
Bloomington had a Discovery Zone for a while, and then the franchise was sold to a local couple, and they turned it into a place called Magic Planet. And I had a job there for like a summer, I think, and it was a really strange experience. You know, working at an indoor playground where everything smells like pizza, everything. Even like the ball pit smelled like pizza. It's actually really fun. They gave me a whistle.
Well, those places were the rage for, you know, like three or 4 years, and then they started getting co-opted into shared kids adult spaces, and then they turned into almost exclusively adult spaces, and then they started to go away. Which is, you know,
Sad.
yeah. I
Really
mean,
sad.
it it's on the one hand, there is this notion of evolving economies that things aren't going to stay the same forever, obviously. But I can't go to a go kart place as easily as I could like 20 years ago. And go karts aren't as, you know, it's not a popular activity, but it's also because it's not available in terms of all the go kart places shutting down made it so you can't really even consider doing that activity. Or like paintball, shit like that. Or there's like still laser tag, crazy enough. Um, but
Hey, they can't stop the future from happening.
but I mean, think about it. When's the last time you went to a go kart place?
Oh man, the last time I sat in a go kart was over a decade ago. Although I have a standing invitation to go out to the country and ride around on a private dirt track with a go kart, so that's where go karting went, and it went into like people who are not just like committed enough to buying their own go kart, but also building a track for it. And it's not like the kind of go karts like up in Indy where they were basically like miniature race cars. These are like, you know, fumbling, tumbly, going around a dirt track with like, you know, trees all around you, go karts.
Well, and the one in Indy that is the indoor uh, actual racetrack is like that's the last place I remember going.
That was the last
And
place I've been.
I don't know how long it's been since I've been there.
That place was
And
awesome.
yeah, but I think that was the closest one.
Before that, I went to a go kart track in Gatlinburg. No, in Dollywood. And it was quite awesome because it was outdoors. The one in Indy probably was more fun. I think I remember like feeling like I was going faster there. But that's like a racetrack, like a real serious business. Those things are so quick.
yeah, I think those went between 40 and 50.
You just had to like
I
hold
know it was
on and turn the
at
wheels.
least 30.
On
It
the
was at least 30.
straightaways, on that like when
Um,
it came back down the ramp, that's when you could get some good speed on that whole straightaway section or the big banking curve section.
yeah, that ramp coming down. Yeah.
The gravity assist. Man, I know why that stuff's not more popular is because there are people who are afraid their kid's gonna like break their neck when they roll the thing over, even though it's really practically impossible to flip those things. And they're in a cage, so it's not like even if it did, you're strapped into a cage. I'm sure there's a way to like get decapitated in one. We've never seen it happen because it doesn't happen very often, if ever.
Yeah, it looks like there's about 5 go-kart places in Indianapolis. Um, wait.
Ooh, they've got go-karts in French Lick, in Montgomery, Indiana. Speedway indoor karting. McLaughlin Motors, Fast Times. Fast Times is the one up that I'm thinking of. Yeah, Fast Times is awesome. Indy Racing Experience, go-kart tracks. Yeah, I mean, it looks like there are options. If we expand the search, there are a couple in Ohio too, and in Cincinnati, and down in Louisville.
Oh, so yeah, Fast Times goes up to 40 miles an hour. Huh, it looks like they didn't even open until 2001, so it must have been in the last 20 years. But it's probably been about 20 years.
Let's see, 23 per person per race. Double cart, that just seems like going slower, unnecessarily slow.
Oh, it's like kids and a parent.
Oh, I see.
Oh, and they do have 2-seaters for adults. They're faster. That's it. So this is like the type of place that persists. Apparently, they put enough time and effort into it that this go-kart facility has stood the test of time so far. Which you could still go out of business, but
so for between option 1, mini VIP starts at $480. VIP Grand Prix starts at $600. Starts with 8 drivers, includes all gear. Spectators are welcome, and that's a package for 8 drivers. Then there's option 2 for hourly track rentals, $1,300 to $1,600 per hour. Oh my god.
Jesus.
5 races per hour that handle about 40 drivers. Need more track time? Just reserve another hour. You can add the pizza buffet and soda bar, and beer and wine are available after racing. Oh man.
But that's where, I remember it's like pretty exhausting in terms of you think you'd be able to go race for like hours on end, but you can't actually, like, your arms get tired and shit.
Yeah. Let's see. If one has a Miata and are part of a regional Miata club, you might be able to get away with spending anywhere from like $150 to $300 a day for like open track events, like track day events especially for Miatas. And that gets you like, an hour of actual track time, maybe more, maybe an hour and a half of actual track time. That's pretty good, I think, for driving a real car. I mean, assuming one already has the real car, plus they have like, track tires and a harness and a roll cage and a helmet, and can take the glass out of the back or the doors and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I think what you're nailing on is the thing. I think the places that shut down were bringing subpar experiences, but then trying to make it so like, oh, it only costs $10, but it's like you might get a shitty racer that doesn't go nearly as fast as everybody else's.
Yeah.
And they're just not, you still got to race, so they're not going to give you your money back. And eventually that person's going to stop going. And eventually everybody gets the shitty race car. So they all stop going and the place shuts down over time. So it's like,
Yeah, and then that
you
person
know,
says, "Screw this! I'm just going to go buy a Miata and build it up so I can go to the open track days, which happen like 4 times a year, and give them $200 and drive at full speed for an hour and a half and have a fucking blast." And in the off season between quarterly days, track days, I'm gonna fix up my Miata and enjoy the shit out of it because I can't drive it like that anywhere else, anyways. And then they go do that for an hour and a half 4 times a year. They're happy as a clam because they have this extensive hobby they developed around driving quickly that doesn't involve paying for subpar equipment at a tiny enclosed track where you're getting beat up by people who don't know how to use their brakes. I think I've been rear-ended more times driving a go-kart than I've any other kind of driving experience. And it's not really that many times, but it's enough. And it was only 1 time, or 2 times.
it feels like the closest thing to driving a life-size radio-controlled car.
Yeah.
Because of the way they
the way they can't turn it, because you have to give it the gas to make them turn.
Yeah, the way that they drive very different than a regular like full-size vehicle. But there's a lot of elements of, because they're closer to the ground and there's no real shocks or anything like that. But they also have a lot of torque applied directly to the ground. It that's why your arms get tired a lot quicker than driving a regular car. I mean, obviously power steering and everything, but it's a matter of like controlling the torque. And the more powerful a go-kart, the more you have to like
hold on,
control. Yeah, hold on, but like flex to keep the car going straight.
Yeah.
And like, it's super fun, but I think that a lot of regular people wouldn't enjoy the danger that comes, or the perceived danger that comes with like when you're going 30 and 40 and turn quickly, it feels like you're gonna flip, but because it's the weight distribution is a certain way, like you'd really have to try, and you'd really have to like,
you'd have to hit an obstacle.
Yeah,
just right for
which
it
is
to tip
possible.
Over. It is,
which is possible.
I mean, I've seen videos where people drive over people because they get into a pileup. But that's because there's like additional forces impacting them and driving the cart over the cart in front of it. And that's like essentially a horror story for kart racing, because that's not supposed to happen. Everyone's supposed to be like skilled enough that they don't get into that kind of situation. You go around somebody if they're slow enough. I mean, I think that's another issue though, is that there are a lot of people, and it seems that, car culture kind of peaked, it seemed, in the late 90s. Mm-hmm. And the response from the automotive industry was to make it more difficult to tune vehicles, more expensive. And then, of course, the competitive side makes it really difficult, because people are just willing to dump money into fast machines and then drive them on, and then demand that they can drive them on the street. But I don't think that that's like the trend. I think the trend is towards safety and economy and utility. People have stuff they want to take when they go places. They need space to do that in. They would rather get all their stuff there than get there quickly and have no stuff to use. Also, who cares if you get there quickly if you have to wait for everyone else to show up?
Yeah, that's what it does seem like things are trending towards.
And so I think that there's always going to be a place for people who want to go fast. They're just going to end up buying very specialized vehicles, and they're going to have to go to special places to use them. And when I say fast, I mean faster than like the current generation of electric vehicles, because I kind of think that's essentially the benchmark for how quick we should expect modern vehicles moving forward. They should all be about that fast, because they have to be now. And if like a Chevy Bolt or that new Chinese $11,000 Chinese electric vehicle can achieve 4 second 0 to 60 acceleration and go 300 miles, then who needs a fucking Mustang or a Corvette to do that shit? You can go that fast and have all your fucking gear. Hell yeah! At a a fraction of the cost of a Corvette. Sign me up.
Yeah.
I'm serious. Like, and
Yeah,
so it
I
really
mean,
it's gonna
when you
come
say it like that, anybody who goes for the Corvette is just kind of an idiot.
Yeah.
At that point. It's like,
I mean, can you imagine someone showing up to track day with their Kia and then roasting everybody? Because that's what's gonna happen. That's absolutely what's gonna happen. Someone's gonna be like, figure out how to re-engineer the firmware and break the warranty on their fancy ass Kia, but they're going to do it to prove a point. And everyone there at track day that day is going to be pissed off because they got passed by a factory Kia. Well, what appears to be a factory Kia. Actually, I bet a factory Kia could probably do it too, because those things are pretty fucking stellar right now. But that's not the point. The point is, like, the trend isn't towards cars that look like they're traveling in hyperspace already. Towards utility, and people are demanding range. So the battery manufacturers are coming up with batteries that have faster recharge rates and longer discharge times. All of these things are good. Yeah, there's a lot of fear. I think it's funny. There's a lot of fear about China, but China's developing all the next generation battery technology right now. They're like on the leading edge, just as good as any other country's battery development. They're doing it, and they have resources to do it too. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they actually managed to finally bring an automobile to America that was fully electric, and and at the same time deliver an infrastructure to support it.
yeah, I think one of the issues is like the way that people who are hyper focused on 0 to 60 drive cars makes electric cars discharge quicker, and it makes their range lower. So not having that culture driving the development, i.e. China, is going to make it so, yeah, their cars are going to probably have longer ranges in general, because they're not trying to fucking outdo a Corvette in a like a minivan or some shit, whereas the American versions are. So it creates this contradiction where you're like, why does my pickup truck need to be faster than a fucking Porsche?
Okay, so it
doesn't.
At what is it, 2:56 on April 23rd, 2023, you predicted the Corvette minivan. The electric Corvette minivan. I'm serious. This is going to happen within the next decade. We're going to see an electric Corvette minivan.
I don't even think it's predicting. Like, have you seen the Mach-E?
Yeah, the Mach-E is basically a minivan. It's like a minivan they squashed in some funhouse mirrors and then elongated. I mean, it's definitely not far off. We're going to have like fully electric minivans that are doing 0 to 60 in 4 seconds, that have top speeds of like 180 miles an hour. And like, forget missing the big game. You can go to the store, get some snacks, then go to the liquor store, get more beer, and then get back before the commercials are done. It's going to be incredible.
Will complain. People are going to complain that their battery range is only 60 miles.
Yeah, at full speed.
It's like, no, you could have driven there slowly and had a range of 400 miles, but no, you wanted to put your foot all the way down.
I think it was like a decade ago. It was Top Gear. They were doing a test, or I think it was Test Drive, Car and Driver, one of the magazines. They were doing a comparison between a Prius and an M Series BMW sedan. And they had the Prius, they told the Prius driver, just do your best, right? And so the driver does their best, and they get Prius fuel economy and what was expected. and it was slow as shit, like just absolutely abysmally slow. And then they said, now go as fast as you can. And then they had the BMW just tail it, and they said, keep up. And the BMW got like exceedingly good fuel economy, like 30, 40 miles per gallon, because it was just idling around behind a tiny little electric or hybrid vehicle that was pushing itself to go fast, you know, to better replicate real world driving. And it turns out if you drive a giant overpowered engine gently, it doesn't consume a lot of fuel.
I mean, that's definitely true in terms of like
That's like physics revealing itself.
Yeah, I have an 8-cylinder, and it's like if you don't mash the gas, you don't get terrible gas mileage.
And you
like,
probably get around just fine too, right?
Yeah. The issue being because it's meant to have the capacity to go fast. When you don't, it doesn't use up that much energy. So it is this element of like having that overpowered thing doesn't necessarily mean you're wasting gas. If you know how to drive it, but at the same time, something like a Hummer, because it's so big.
Oh god, you have to give it the gas. And it's
right to get it moving. So it's like everything isn't powered for the same reasons. Like,
yeah,
a small car with an overpowered engine isn't going to be the same as like a big overpowered truck. But this is, again, we're still in this paradigm of like American muscle, and
it's always been interesting to me that like in Europe trucks exist, but they're all like commercial vehicles practically, and there are SUVs. Yeah. SUVs as a culture exist, but they're expensive, and even the biggest European SUVs aren't nearly as gigantic as like mid-sized American SUVs. And then minivans exist, but they're actually small, like not as big as American minivans. It's really strange. Like even Japanese market minivans, like we don't get all of the Toyota minivan or Honda vehicle offerings. We don't see all of the like the foreign market vehicles that are not anywhere near as large. Like even the Hilux gets kind of supersized so that it can become a Tacoma in America. And so I think it's interesting, like in a lot of these places, yeah, sure, a truck exists, but it's the size of a Tacoma or the size of like a Ranger. And but in America, we demand huge vehicles, like almost commercial sized vehicles in other countries. And then these are people's personal vehicles.
And then we wonder why there's so many potholes.
Yeah.
Man, it's like if we downsized our cars, our infrastructure would be so much better off.
I think obviously
it's old.
I think it's a reflection of the kind of not necessarily the needs, but the wants, the projected needs. Like I find myself taking more stuff with me when I go camping than I actually need, but I take it because just in case, and it doesn't hurt because I have the space. But it's also one of those things like I don't actually need some of this stuff like ever. Like when was the last time I used X item inside this box? I probably could just like go through it and put those things into a second box of stuff that I might never use. And then next time I go camping, I'll actually need one of those things. That's how it works, right?
Well, it's funny in terms of like that type of preparation is often steeped in like the negative experience from the previous time. So it's like, oh, how many pairs of underwear do I
actually need?
And it's like, yeah, and it's like, well, I think I only need this, but I'm going to take this just in case. And like, whatever you think you need, you take extra just in case because of whatever happened last time. And it's like that type of preparation, it's really hard to get out of
You know, the weird thing about extra socks and underwear is that the times that I have had extra socks and underwear, I've been in the position where it's like, you know what? If I just change these two articles of clothing, I'm going to feel like I just took a shower compared to what I feel like now. And then I do, and I feel like I just took a shower, and I'm like rejuvenated. It's like the in like the Epic Quest video game where you find the elixir, and that's all you need is you just need to find your new pair of shoes, and then all of a sudden you're like back to 100%, and you can jump higher. But you're right. There have been plenty of times when I didn't have enough pairs of socks, and I ended up spending, you know, an entire day with wet socks, and that's horrible. But again, I think once people, well, a lot of this kind of is me projecting into the way that open spaces and public spaces are being developed, and wilderness spaces like forestries are being developed to encourage more utilization and have greater utility, easier access to like hiking trails and things like that. I think once that infrastructure is, you know, further developed and it's easier to go to those places, and the barriers to access are reduced such that even the most basic vehicle can get there. You don't need four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. It doesn't even matter if there's snow on the ground because it'll be paved, kind of thing. There are charging stations at the parking lots. Once that infrastructure exists, then like all of those fears of like, crap, what happens if this thing happens will be completely, you know, addressed.
And then once that exists, if it exists, does a flying car need to exist?
I don't think flying cars
Because
can exist. People are so mean on the
right,
roads.
no, I mean, I don't think they can either. Like, I don't think it's like realistic. But I think there is this element of like, do our scientific potentials give us the sense to create larger than we need to as a society in a way that then becomes like an impediment because we're trying to attain something that we don't need to, and it doesn't actually help society in a way that starts putting us back when we start trying to attain it, like the hyperloop, for example. Like,
And that's a future that just failed to materialize. It had such good marketing. It had all this wonderful science fiction potential. But we can't even fully utilize our current freight system. So and it's like ancient compared to a hyperloop.
yeah, but like you were saying, it has such good marketing that it got closer to implementation than it should have been before people had a chance to really assess how terrible of an idea it was. And the specialists knew it was a terrible idea, but that's where again it's like we're in a place where the specialists don't get listened to if they don't have a marketing team. Um, and now I don't know if Twitter was necessarily the biggest marketing platform in existence, but now that it's consolidated under the what is it, X Corp conglomerate, effectively one, oh, I guess what, three
I think we gotta
corporations.
start calling it Scorp.
But this whole platform was framed as if it was he was purchasing it to save free speech. In reality, it's an advertising platform. So now you have this person who runs a car company and runs a space exploration company, owning the biggest marketing platform, running it into the ground, this not doing well, but he still owns it. So what does capitalism do in response? Because that's where I'm like, this feels this feels like a mistake on capitalism's part to give this much influence over that much advertising to one entity. And I think as we see it play out, um, I don't know if influencing is going to go away necessarily, but I really feel like we've hit peak influence market and are going to be on the decline of influencing in terms of like, I don't know if it's going to be a job anymore. Um, in terms of like, for the last 12 years, there was a significant group of people that if you asked them, what do you do? I'm an influencer. And as the notion of that being
A
a
thing at
job,
all?
yeah, it's really strange. Um, because even if like, okay, even if our podcast got big and we became influential, we'd still be podcasting. We'd be podcasters, not influencers. So for someone to identify themselves as an influencer, there's this real disconnected delusion of their opinion being so important that they think their influence is that valuable. Not to deny, of course, influence can be valuable, but the idea of somebody influencing as a job, it's it always had a shelf life, but I feel like
Is
Twitter.
influencing like a variation of marketing then? Is that?
I mean, definitely, but
But it's also tied to a personality, right? Like a
right.
lifestyle.
I think there is this notion of establishing a brand identity around promoting what they think their audience sees as quality. I'm not really I'm not really sure what the delusion is wrapped up in. I can only guess. But that's where, because it doesn't really have its own end except to influence people, it always had a shelf life. So that's where I think um, that window is starting to close, and it seems to me as if Twitter being acquired and effectively consolidated into there is a corporate culture that exists in Tesla and it exists in SpaceX and now exists within Twitter because of their acquisition, which
So
seems to have.
so this is kind of
Sorry, go ahead.
interesting actually because I've been paying attention to like NAM, National Association National Association of Music Merchandisers, for a long time because that's where all of the announcements for like amplifiers and guitar effects or guitars or synthesizers or recording equipment, all that stuff. That's where they used to make those big announcements at the NAM conventions. And in the last couple of years, especially because of the pandemic, there have been there's been quite a reduction in the presence of quite a few mainstream manufacturers and some high-level manufacturers too. And like Fender guitars, they stopped going to NAMM because they decided they don't need NAMM. They can create enough content for the internet to get people to buy direct or to go to a local dealership. And a lot of bigger companies are going this route, and which makes it harder for like NAMM to get the convention center space and to keep it functioning the way they do. Apparently this year they were only using one floor for audio recording instead of two. And so this is kind of interesting, because if the trend for younger people is to go with this kind of influencer direct marketing paradigm, then the old model of sending a representative to meet with manufacturing or distributing representatives to forge relationships within an industry has essentially, it's no longer necessary. Because now the companies have figured, the manufacturers have figured out how to directly engage with the audience instead of having to go through the middleman, essentially, of the marketplace. I'm not sure that's a bad thing.
No, I mean that part I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. But how I guess
The
I'm
personality
not
being dominant
sure.
isn't good, though. I don't like that part.
I mean, but I don't know how long that's going to keep persisting,
Yeah.
because that platform has been co-opted in a way that people are no longer going to that looking for other people, because it's basically pushing the top down narrative. So you're not going to be able to find new influencers necessarily on Twitter, because it's controlled by Tesla and SpaceX effectively. So I think that's where
So I just
I
looked
don't.
up. I just looked up what influencer on Google, and the top hit is influencer.com. And when I go to influencer.com, their partners are Meta and TikTok.
And that, that makes more sense in terms of like TikTok is probably,
That's probably the future, at least for a
or at
little
least
while.
where the kids are at right now. Like
Yeah.
the kids aren't on Twitter, and it's not like the kids were coming to Twitter for influencing. But there was that perception, which is why it was valuable. And now we're seeing that that's not really the case. So that's where I'm also, obviously 44 billion was way overvalued, but are these platforms going to get more accurately valued now that we're seeing that they don't translate into sales? Um, it's the individual uh, influencers and their audience that are it's on a case by case basis, but it's always the influencer and not the platform. Um, like kids aren't going to TikTok for TikTok; they're going for the influencers.
Yeah.
And so that's where the platforms being able to control uh, how many influencers they have, or in terms of like making partnerships. Like I think that's because of what's happened. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to continue doing that in terms of like um, they can't make too big of a deals, and they also can't make deals too long, because these influencers tend to like do some shit that gets them in trouble. So it's like you can't make like a 5-year deal. It's more like a 6-month to 12-month at a time. That's really feasible. And in that context, the the influencers aren't going to be loyal to the platforms, and they're going to jump around, and it's going to accelerate the like dissolution of influencer culture, because it's not really concentrated on any one platform. Um, and it's becoming less and less concentrated. Like it used to be some of it at Twitch, used to be some of it at YouTube, some of it at TikTok. And increasingly it's like less at any of those places. And it's about the individual. Like it's about Logan Paul and Jake Paul and KSI and like um I don't know, that's about all the influencers I could probably name without Googling them. the kids know the influencers. They know the apps, but they're there for the influencers. So that's where I'm like,
That's actually
also,
kind of interesting. Like there's when I was going through my YouTube subscriptions to do some culling, I noticed that the ones that I was keeping most of were the channels that I've identified as providing what I consider to be like master classes in like audio engineering or acoustics or like examples of people building things, like how to create a good frame that'll support its own weight and the weight of like a ceiling, things like that. And I'm less interested in the ones where I feel like I'm being sold a product. If there's a service involved, I can kind of get through that because on some level there's probably some theory that I'm interested in that they might be answering a question about. But for the most part, as soon as I feel like I'm being sold stuff, it just makes me feel less inclined to pay attention to it at all. And so I found myself, unsubscribe. I took it from like 200 something subscriptions down to 106. And I still feel like I should go through it again. But there was one person that stood out, and I've Googled them before, and one of the things that I thought was funny was this comment was that their personality doesn't match their wardrobe. And I started to think about that because that's a really strange thing. It was really amusing when a personality doesn't match the wardrobe. And it occurred to me that a lot of the things that on their entire channel, it was like they weren't marketing it towards me. They were marketing it towards like my dad. Here's a person my age who is talking about stuff that's really not for my generation or our generation or even young people. It's like stuff that's expensive and aspiration level equipment, not the kind of stuff that a teenager or a young 20-something or a 30-year-old who wants to finally learn how to play the guitar goes out and buys. It's the stuff that, you've got retirement money. That's what you can do with this stuff. And it's really...
It feels like...
It's disingenuous.
It feels like the people who are doing those ads convince some boomer that doing that ad would sell them a bunch of shit to boomers.
I think it does,
a lot of those... I mean, maybe. I don't know. But that's where that's what it feels like in terms of like even... shit like Linus Tech Tips. It feels like they're trying to sell to your dad and not you. In terms of like the cool, you can get this cool Steam Deck and be like your son, and then and like the way that they frame it's like the people trying to be cool by buying the most expensive shit, or like Jay's 2 cents. Like, he's definitely selling to my dad, not me. His hair is too white to sell to me. And it's like, he's definitely talking to your dad, but he's trying to sound cool like us.
Well, I know there's something up when they're talking about, and I've been playing guitar most of my life, and I've paid attention to guitar pedals for almost as long. And when I find someone talking about something and referencing some really obscure pedal that I remember sucking, like really sucking back in the 90s or early 2000s, and then there's some waxing going on about how, oh yeah, you can do all these things. And then I listen to the example and it's like nowhere close to the music that I was interested in back then, let alone now. That's when I realized, oh, this is just a fucking well-dressed commercial. That happens a lot. Like there's like an entire class of YouTube videos now that are well-dressed commercials that try to... I saw a video last night. A guy was talking about using VHS as a in a serious music experiment. And I thought, like, well, I guess, I mean, it has like an actual analog layer, audio layer to it, but it stores everything digitally, so I guess that's kind of cool. But no, they were just using it to create a degraded audio sample, like a synth library. And all I could think of then is that there are tools in plugin form that just plug in, change a few values, and then it does this thing to it, this degraded sound. I guess there's probably more to it that I like missed, because I admit I skipped through portions of it because it started to get kind of dragging on. But even then, I felt like I was being sold a VHS recording device, a VCR, like a 20, 30-year-old VCR. It's like, is this really where this goes? Going to get people looking for VCRs on eBay?
I think that's what they expected. And there's this weird expectation of anything that goes out of production becoming valuable with that generation. To the point people like, I guess Netflix is delivering their last envelopes, and
Holy shit. A pre-owned Sony 4-head hi-fi VCR refurbished $200.
It's so dumb. It's so dumb. But yeah, people think that like the Netflix envelopes are going to be valuable because Netflix is no longer going to deliver them. It's like,
that's
just because things stop being produced, it's really like a hoarder's mentality. But all the boomers are basically low-key hoarders because they think shit's going to get valuable.
I think even at this point, like $100 is way too much for a VCR.
Yeah, anything over $0 is too much for a VCR. Like, somebody needs to pay me to take a VCR. I'm not paying anybody else to take a VCR.
I mean,
if I'm going to take a VCR and not throw it out, you have to pay me to do it.
I haven't.
That's the only condition I'm keeping a VCR anywhere.
Like on the back of the TVs, I don't even look for anything other than the HDMI anymore, and so I'm not even sure if they have RCA inputs anymore. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't. I mean, I know they have like audio outputs, but do they still have the yellow, red, and white inputs? That's still a thing on TVs? How are we supposed to get anything out of the VCR? Because I mean, I remember how hard it was to get the VCR out of the blinking clock mode. I mean, that shit, you had to like press multiple buttons sometimes just to get it to enter information and then to save the time. And then, of course, somebody was just going to unplug it and then lose all your settings. Like, what if you have to change the channel internally to output audio on a different channel? What if you can't even select the channel?
Nobody.
People are going to be searching for old tube televisions, old CRTs, and old old DLP screens, and paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars for those fucking light bulbs so they can use their fucking VCR. I don't see this niche like emerging. This is like this.
Those things are too heavy for that niche to emerge.
Yeah.
Like, I had a 32-inch television at some point, and it must have weighed 70 or 80 pounds. I don't know how much that thing weighed. It maybe.
I remember you had a giant television that took like 4 or 5 people to move.
Yeah, but it wasn't big. It was like a 32.
It was just heavy.
Like, it was big. Yeah, it was like,
it was deep.
A big screen for like 2004.
Yeah, it was like it was pretty big. I remember that TV. I think it was like right next to the cat condo in the basement, right?
No, it was never in a basement.
Oh, it was a different.
Yeah, it was only ever on either ground floor on a second. Like, we lived in a second-story apartment on 14th.
Oh yeah.
At Brownstone Terrace. We threw another TV off that balcony when we got the new one. So it was like ceremonial destruction of the old TV.
Did it make a big pop?
It cracked. It did. It wasn't a huge noise, but
Okay.
yeah, those. It took two people to throw the old TV over the ledge. It wasn't even that big a one. Which again, those old TVs were so fucking heavy.
You just reminded me that there was like a time during like my teenage and early 20s when I knew to avoid apartment complexes during certain times of the year because people would be dropping shit off of their balconies just all willy-nilly. Got to be really careful.
Oh yeah, yeah. Second, when there's more than one story, moving time,
and someone's like, when you see people trying to lower a couch like over a balcony. People get creative when they do stuff like that. It's entertaining, but it's really scary. It's just dangerous. And it still happens too, because every so often I see like a fail blog video where someone's trying to hand the TV down from the balcony to the ground floor, and the person on the ground just barely has it. They're like completely underneath it and just folds over and smacks the ground. Because everyone thinks they can just grab a falling television.
Yeah, we're getting close to that time. We're gonna start seeing the great mattress migration.
the what is it? The congregation of dressers and cabinets.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is funny in terms of if you're at that point in terms of furniture needing like new pieces, it's really a good time of year to find shit.
Oh yeah.
But you really got to be on your ball because like it moves fast. Like we have the view of a dumpster, and we'll just like watch and like see how long stuff takes to get taken away. And it's like the nicer something is, it won't even last an hour. Sometimes it's like people. There's dumpster diving happening at like all hours of the day. Well, if you pay attention.
It's the best time of year if you have large objects you need to get rid of, because there are so many dumpsters that overflow that you can just drop stuff off and it'll get taken care of. But you're right. I've seen people driving around town with like, full-size pickup trucks with 17-foot trailers, and they're just loaded up with stuff. They're just picking stuff up, and they probably have like a weekend yard sale that they go to, or flea market that they run, or flea market they go to and yard sale they run. Time to restock the inventory. The students are moving out.
Well, I wonder, it seems like a lot of the dumpster diving is about finding metal, and then I guess they sell that metal like
scrapping is always going to return something because recycling is a thing, and like JB Salvage will buy aluminum and tin and copper and steel,
which I think a lot of nobody really fucks with the divers and doesn't call the cops on them, because I guess it does kind of like, they're not really hurting anybody as long as they're not getting stuck in the.
As long as they're not getting hurt, nobody notices.
Right. Yeah. Which has happened before, but that's why, that's why there's rules about it. But it's nobody's trying to die when they're dumpster diving necessarily, but I think there is this element of like Bloomington specifically has allowed the culture to persist in a way that um, they don't really cause any trouble. So I do think that however they uh, manage it among the city, it turns out like an actual ecosystem instead
Yeah.
of like
Well, it reflects a culture that doesn't want to let things be wasted.
right. Yeah.
That people are willing to utilize things that might be used because hey, that's not junk. And not everyone has like the tools necessary to go to like Menards and get a bunch of lumber and build their own furniture. That's actually really difficult. Like once you see like how complex uh, like a sofa actually is.
Yeah. Even a table for that matter.
Yeah,
I
I mean
mean,
like a solid table that lasts a long time is not easy to
yeah.
build.
I have a friend who built, a table from scratch and, from all of the pieces and all the cuts and everything. And it's like it took months uh to get all the sanding and shit done. Like between if he had like time to sit down and do it in a day, I don't think it would have taken as long, but he had other shit to do. So it was like
Yeah,
uh seeing like
I
stuff
built
being done from scratch, it's like if you have the time, it doesn't have a problem, but you really can't like do anything else.
I built a table just to house to store the orchids on, and I did everything that I thought I was supposed to do. I selected the wrong kind of stain. I thought it had polyurethane in it, but it did not. And part of the wood deck itself warped, and I can't do anything about it because it's not a thin piece of wood. It's just like it's a piece of edge glued pine that I failed to seal properly. But it still works, so I'm still going to use it. But I didn't do it right. I can see that now. It's hard to do stuff like that and know how it's going to turn out. And you're right. It's got to. If you want things to be done really well, you got to. It takes time because most people aren't machines. Like machined edges are really nice, but you can see them when you can see when a hand has actually been on a piece of wood.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can't have unfinished wood be exposed, which is like, the bigger the table, the more the sanding, or the bigger the. Um,
The
I
more
mean, I
intricate
guess
the
it's like
structure, the more effort it requires. It's pretty crazy. Like I've got some really simple, shelf-based woodworking stuff, like there's basic cabinets, and they're all utility, and they don't look nice. They're just functional, and that's all I need them to be. I just need them to function. And there are times when I wish that I had spent more time, you know, carefully sealing everything so that they wouldn't alter over time. But I couldn't have predicted how those things would have happened anyways. That's also like not really. That wasn't like um, making it look like IKEA wasn't my motivation.
yeah, and that's design is another element that if you're not constantly doing it, jumping into that part is like, well, how much capacity to design on the first try is one going to be able to do?
Yeah,
Um,
like my the desk in the sunroom is an evolution, and it's finally got its own desk, but it took years to evolve into this. And if I were to redo it now, it would be a lot nicer, but it wouldn't be the same. I wouldn't have been able to plan it like this from the get-go. And I definitely wouldn't have been able to shoehorn like one of those big office desk hutch L-shaped thing, monotonous gigandor, executive desks. I couldn't have shoehorned that into this space. I'd be like working in a closet. Working in a cubicle is also a lot like working in a closet, except it doesn't have like full walls, so you don't actually feel like you're enclosed. But as soon as you sit down, you're absolutely enclosed.
Do they still get used? I mean, I don't know. Like, I know.
I think
What was it? The
cubicle
open air office spaces.
Yeah, I think cubicle technology has been repurposed to creating quiet zones and like quiet meeting spaces, because the technology still is, it still absorbs sound, it still dampens sound, it still does all the things that people needed to do. They just needed to make them even more enclosed. I think they were like, that was the solution to people who absolutely needed to be isolated for like, whatever telemeeting they had to do when the open office format itself does not lend itself to that very well.
Yeah, I wonder how open air affected productivity in terms of like you would think it would do one thing, and I don't know like if it necessarily did that. So
Well, I think it depends on the culture that's working in that environment.
that's true.
Because
That's definitely true.
if you have a group of people who went to school in a place where everyone was encouraged to use the library, and that culture emerged like group work in a library setting, then open air makes perfect sense. But then if everyone was used to working in their dorm all the time and they never had any kind of real interaction, then remote work actually makes more sense.
Well, yeah, I wonder if it's now. It almost sounds like a generational thing
I
the way
think
you
it
break it
is.
down.
I mean, I did everything at home. I was always working at home. Homework was always done like at the computer at like whatever apartment I lived in when I was going to IU. And so the only time I went into the library was for like explicit group work where it was inconvenient to meet anywhere else. And I know that that's not the case for everyone. I know that there are a lot of people who completely thrived by working in the library. I actually liked the library, but not for like not for the big open space, but for the stacks.
Yeah, there's really something to going uh into a dedicated space to do that type of work, because I remember um as an undergrad it did take like going to the library to be free of distraction, in terms of like if you're not at the library people think that you're down to do anything or down to like party or whatever.
Yeah.
So it just makes it really difficult to focus on work. um which is where, yeah, I remember explicitly going to the library in a way that like it didn't seem odd at the time, but having a computer at home and going to a different place to use one, it's like that wasn't necessary, but like it was mentally necessary, not physically, like just to get in the right mindset. But I think when you can create that space at home, like now, I'm not in a place where people just come knock on my door and like want to hang out and shit like that. So it's not, you when you're an undergrad, shit like that happens way more frequently. And I think that's where it's just, as you get older, people stop trying to do spontaneous parties as frequently.
Nobody has energy for spontaneity anymore. We're all too
Right?
busy.
Yeah.
We all have interests that are too complicated to just drop at a moment's notice to go do things. Like on the off chance I get called up and someone's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" and I say nothing, it actually means that I don't want to do anything. Now it means like I don't have anything to do. I'm going to do my own thing. And it's really strange because in the past, if I said I ain't doing anything, it means tell me what you're doing because I want to go do something. But it's strange how that even changes. I think what it really means is that a lot of those previous experiences of trying to be spontaneous and go do something ends up resulting in standing around a lot and waiting for something to happen because nothing's actually happening. And whatever action was happening is done.
Yeah, there is. It is funny in terms of the young view of activity and boredom and like chasing entertainment or chasing the
Looking for something to do, anything to do.
yeah, the dragon that is non-boredom. And you get so wrapped up in that as a kid, it's like the daily thing, but then as you get older, it's like you want to do nothing more and more. Just want to relax and do nothing because you're constantly needing to do something. Um, so I think it is funny to, as one gets older, the notion of like wanting something to happen because there's nothing happening versus like after so many things happen that ultimately need money to solve the problems and it results in a problem. It's like you probably don't want anything to happen actually.
Yeah.
Because it's probably not going to be good. You're not just going to randomly fall into money or find some money. So if something happens, it's probably going to end up costing someone money. So you just want nothing to happen.
Although, and I haven't done this in a while, but people watching used to be like a hobby of mine. When I lived downtown, I would just go and sit on the square, or I would post up and get a coffee and just watch people. And because I lived downtown, I could do this during certain hours of the night when I could expect drunk people doing drunk people things. And for a while, this was really entertaining, but after a while, it was just kind of sad. Seeing like countless strangers all going into a place and then leaving and acting like idiots or falling down on themselves or walking around outside, running outside and puking in the alley because they didn't have the sense to go to the bathroom and contain it where they could clean themselves up and then leave with a little bit of dignity. And then seeing that countless times, it just makes me not want to go into those places. All these places that, as a teenager is like, I can't wait to go in there and listen to these bands or play pool or something. I don't even like to play pool anymore. But I don't like loud bars, so short of like a billiard parlor, where would I actually go play pool?
Right? If you don't like pool that much, then it's not worth it to go to a bar and there's not enough billiard halls to do it casually. So it's like there are things where you have to like it's either your hobby and you do it enough that you end up doing it at home.
Yeah, I don't like
or you
pool enough
go
to
out
own
and
a
find
fucking
it,
pool table. Shit, I don't have the space
or
for it.
go up to Indianapolis to do it, or I guess to the vid.
Yeah, but that's too loud.
Yeah.
So like the options are commit a minimum of 3 hours of driving to play pool. Own a pool table, which requires having an entire room dedicated to a pool table because you can't share a room with a pool table. It just doesn't work. They're like, it's like a throne. They're the most dominant thing. They'll overpower anything in a room. And then people will end up putting like big pieces of wood over the top of them and trying to use them as tables to eat food on. And that only works until someone spills something, and then you've got who knows what kind of fluids on the deck of the pool table. I think the pool table is like a variation of the piano. It's a nice idea, but they're so big. And I don't mean like an upright piano, because even that's still really big, but like a grand piano, like that, those things are monstrous. You can't just have like a room. You have to have a really big room to have a grand piano.
Yeah, my mom has a baby grand, and it takes a whole room basically.
Yeah, a baby
and
grand.
It's not a small room.
Yeah, a baby grand takes up an entire not small room of a concert grand or a stage grand, like some one of those things. Like, fuck.
Yeah, they're huge.
And that's like pool table size. At least a ping pong table or like can fold up and be rolled out of the way and stored in the garage somewhere. Rolling around a pool table sounds like a bad idea. But I think that's like, just like with the culture of cars changing, there's like a utility to this stuff. I think people realize, they don't need pool tables. They don't need giant pianos. These things aren't these aren't big items. They're still big items, of course. But I don't think that like the culture that exists now is aspiring to own things like that. I don't think.
For a while, it seemed like everybody was trying to have a pool table, a man cave,
a jacuzzi.
Yeah, all the stuff.
Yeah. But I don't think that's as prevalent in the current youth culture. That's not what they're aspiring to. From what I've gleaned, it seems like experience is the thing that's motivating people. Experiences instead of things. Exceptional Radio. Exceptional Randos shows produced live in Sunroom Studios' Bass Capsule. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.